Hey everybody, Ramon here from the LitRPG Podcast. I had a really great time talking to Aleron Kong recently about his latest book in the Chaos Seed series, Book 6, The Land, Raiders. Had a nice long interview, which we're going to watch in a few seconds, so I'll let you get there. But before we hit that point, I wanted to make sure, give him a nice introduction. I had a great time talking about, my questions for the Book of the Land, audience questions for the Book of the Land, and also the general state of the LitRPG community as Aleron and I just kind of talk and chat. It's more of a chat than an interview, if I'm being honest. We've had a couple of these already, so we kind of run out of those author questions. But after we stop recording, I also want to let you know about the LitRPG Gala, which is something that Aleron did last year around DragonCon, where some folks in the area met up and met in real life and talked about the passion and things that they love about LitRPG, IRL, instead of just on Facebook or the internets. So it's going to be, again, this year around DragonCon in Atlanta, Georgia. If you're going to be in that area, mark out some time so that you can join Aleron and hopefully me, if I can make it, of course. Aleron doesn't have a firm venue yet for it, but he plans on making an announcement about it as he gets those details put together. I'm sure as we get closer to the event, he'll put things up on Facebook, internet, all those newsletters, his webpage, all those great things. It's actually one of our podcast goals to be able to go this year. We just need the funding. So if you want to help support us on that, you can go to patreon.com/GeekSpicePodcast to do so. It's something I kind of wanted to do last year. Just, it's expensive for me to fly from California. So there you go. But before you watch the interview, I want to make sure you get a chance to watch the latest trailer for The Land, Raiders. Here you go, and go enjoy that interview.
What the hell is this place?
That's Kong. He's king around here. Kong's a pretty good king. Keeps to himself mostly. But you don't go into someone's house and start dropping bombs unless you're picking a fight.
Gnomes rule.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. Thank you very much for joining me today. Today I have the pleasure of talking to a regular contributor to the LitRPG Podcast. He's the author of the best-selling Chaos Seed series. He's here to talk about Book 6, The Land, Raiders, upcoming real quick. Please welcome to our wonderful podcast, the latest, greatest father of American LitRPG, Aleron Kong.
What's up, man? It's good to talk to you again.
No, absolutely.
And great the secret chat that we had before we started this. So that was awesome.
I love talking to you, man. It's always a great joy to just chat with somebody who's in a similar position to I am, where we're creators, we're also content consumers, and we both have this really great love of the genre, and we care about where it goes, and we try to help the group and the genre as much as possible. So thanks for showing. Thanks for coming on, man.
Like day 6, basically. So that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm super excited about talking about Book 6. I'm like, wow, 6 whole books. I don't know that personally I'm going to be able to write that many books at some point. But you come out on a really good cycle. I'm like, it's only been like 2 years, and you're already at 6 books out.
No, I put first paper to page September 15th. I released November 21st. So it's been, 14 months. It's nuts.
That is an absolutely, wow, amazing writing schedule. I have to say, I'm looking at us every 6 months as a release for my books. And I'm like, you'd be putting out another 6 by the time I finish, I think. Well,
people ask, they're like, how do you get it done? And I'm like, well, it's just about having a completely unrealistic expectation, because I thought, I had storylines planned out from day one, but I thought I would get from here to here in 3 books, and I've gotten from here to here in 6 books. That's why I had to start putting a timeline on my chapters, because people are like, why isn't it happening, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, it's been 4 months. And they're like, oh, well, I guess that makes more sense then. I don't know.
Yeah. I didn't notice that because I had the same issues where like, there's so much story in there that you feel like it's like months and months and months, and it's only been like a couple days or like a week at the most sometimes. And you don't skip in the future. You don't go like, oh, a week later. You're always like, I'm talking about that whole week because there's a lot of stuff this guy got to get done.
Basically. I mean, every once in a while there'll be like they're preparing for something kind of thing, but for the most part, like, you know, they're just kind of like in his little zone in the forest, and you know, kind of what's happening there. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and of course it gets more complicated the more characters you start to introduce. The whole village that you talk about. So there's a ton of other like branching storylines that you can go through, and there's so much stuff that, as far as like storyline goes, to fit into like a novel. Sometimes like, oh, I have more than enough stuff to tell in a story.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very, very blessed that like my readers are sticking with me. Like every once in a while, I get it's like, yo, dude, it's enough. Or the other one, somebody else is like, yeah, I can't keep reading your books. I love them, but like enough, go away. And they just want me to finish it. But like I said, I feel like super blessed that people are staying with me through this saga that I'm trying to get done.
Yeah, and definitely more and more. Each book you put out introduces new readers like, oh, this is a great book, but where does this start? And they go all the way back to the beginning. And, you know, that's how you get, 400 reviews for book one at this point. It's just a matter of, looks over time, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been a good ride, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm real happy for you. I totally understand how you feel, like the love of the community. It's like, oh, look at them. They're buying my thing and they're leaving reviews, and it makes you kind of happy because it's like people actually enjoy it. Like I personally, since I put out my own book, get those private messages, those PMs on Facebook or those emails saying, thank you so much for writing this story. You've introduced me to LitRPG, and it's my new favorite genre, and I didn't know I loved it until I found it, and it's awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm sure you get the same kind of messages on a regular basis.
And it's like the most validating thing that like can happen. And people are always like, hey man, I really don't want to bother you. I'm so sorry for, emailing you like this. And I'm like, no, dude, this is awesome. What's going on? And blah, blah, blah. And it's amazing speaking to people that had a positive reaction. And a lot of times it's like joy, and it's like, they're kind of happy and blah, blah, blah. But every once in a while it's like, I was really moved by the scene that you wrote. And it reminded me of like, when my mom passed, or it reminded me of when I had to say goodbye to like a friend for whatever. And I don't know, the idea that it could give like a catharsis, like in any way to someone is like almost like a validation of like your life. Like at least I did something good, while I was here.
Because in a way, like those scenes that you read are experiential from your point of view sometimes. Right? So they're connecting with your character, but they're also connecting with you as as the author. Because I haven't had those particular emails or messages from anybody because my stuff isn't that emotional yet. But I've had those connections to things other people are like in Continue Online. Like that first book in that series is like very emotional about the loss of a loved one and the emotional journey that character goes on. And to me, all those things that character went through, I'm like, I've done all those things, and I'll admit that I kind of cried a little bit when I read that story because it just mirrored some of my own personal experiences in my past. I'm like, I totally understand how connected a good story can make a reader feel.
And I mean, I think it's awesome that like we can even reference those kind of stories now, where we can say like, oh, well, when I read, Continue Online, or when I read like, Alter World or something like that, it evoked something in me. And I mean, a year ago we couldn't do that. It's like, there were like 2 or 3 stories that we liked, and then there were like maybe 2 or 3 other LitRPG stuff where like, God, I hate this book, but at least it's LitRPG. I mean, you're kind of just like flipping through it. And it's awesome that like all these like, kind of cool dudes have found their voice and are like adding to it. I mean, it's kind of crazy thinking that it's only been a year for like the explosive amount of growth that the genre has undergone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Like it feels like it should be like 3 or 4 years at this point that we've been doing this. And that, like, even this podcast, I think it's less than a year. We're already like 26, 27 episodes or whatever. But it feels like I've been doing this my whole life because of the amount of time that you devote into the genre I think that it is. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Sometimes I will type at work, and like one of my colleagues will just be there, and they're like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you haven't looked up for 2 hours. And I'm like crap, is that true? Yeah, it's totally true. I mean, it takes over our lives. This is what we are at this point, Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It is a thing, and we just try to balance everything out. But let's go talking about your book. We
Okay.
get off track. I know.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about book 6 in your series, the Land Raiders. In books 1 through 5, our main character Richter. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm saying it correct for once.
Yeah.
It's only taken 6 books, man.
Yeah. Richter.
Richter is transported into the Land, which is a fantasy world ruled by RPG mechanics like leveling, spells, experience points, skills, all those great things. In books 1 through 5, Richter makes friends, allies. He establishes the Mist Village community, which also gives it a kind of almost a real-time strategy aspect to the story. In that you have branching paths of technology brands, magic paths, things like that. Now, at the end of book 5, there's a huge, massive battle. And Richter is literally left on a cliffhanger. What can you tell me about what you have in store for our hero in book number 6?
So 5 was a bit of a departure. It was just physically longer because some of my readers had just said, do something special. And I was like, yeah, sure. And it got so exponentially difficult to balance everything that I was trying to do and like remember what I'd said in like page 5 when I was on page 500 that I was like, no, done. I can't do that again. But it also honestly reflected 2 things. One, that I was focusing on the town, like the village itself, as a character. Something that I always had planned to do because my favorite games, were RPG shooters and strategy like Civilization. And I always had an idea that I would be able to bring that in to sort of play with my story. So 5 was very much about that. And then there was the battle at the end that I was not planning to a cliffhanger because it like pisses everyone off. But when I had the idea, I was like, oh, it's just too good. I just can't not do this. So yeah, I had to. But for this one, I honestly kind of had an idea that I wanted to go back to like my roots, like to book 1, that just very much about like the game feel, very much about just sort of like introducing a new magic or a new level of kind of intricacy to what he has to like balance in order to make the game vibrant. The people that have enjoyed playing Civ with the insane amount of mods that are like, there's so many things you have to balance and it's insanely like, frustrating but awesome, will like still really, really, really be into the book. People that, kind of just wanted to push power on the Nintendo and crush some enemies, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be some enjoyment for them, but I'm really kind of like hinting and laying the groundwork for this sort of leaving just the forest in itself and becoming the village and Richter becoming more part of a more global community. So.
No, Rich has always been part of the plan. I talked to you in other interviews. Your goal was always like, oh, this planet is the size of Jupiter, and we're on a very small part of it. And eventually, you're going to expand the story from that little small, speck of dust on the world to a much larger picture. Maybe not the whole global of this one, but you're definitely bringing in other nations and other communities into the storyline, which is great to me because that allows for some very interesting storytelling opportunities. Yeah,
and that's one of the things that I love about the fact that when you can sculpt your own story as well, that unlike, an RPG where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go do this quest and all this other stuff that they're asking me to do is just going to pause until I go do this other quest. Or Richter is very much part of his world and it's still spinning around him when he's sleeping or when he's focusing on whatever else. And he's going to start kind of getting ground under the grist of just being one person and not being able to meet up with the demands of the enemies that he's making, of the tasks that he's said that he's going to adopt, of the responsibilities that he's picked up. And since he's just one man, he's kind of leaving something to the wayside. There will be consequences for that. My goal was always to write a story that I wanted to read, but my secondary goal was to write a story that didn't just kind of like everything works out because it's a magic thing and you can sort of pull a rabbit out of your hat, but instead like there are real human consequences that will factor in with the storyline. So that's I feel like I got a lot of that done with book 6 though, so it's cool.
Yeah, no, you definitely leave some very memorable consequences for Richter's decisions. Sometimes I'm like, like dead bodies, dead friends, dead villagers, and make a lot of logical sense, and
Yeah.
which I think adds to readers' enjoyment, because then it's just like, oh, magic plot hole, one is going to fix everything, and nope, it doesn't
No.
always. Sometimes bad things happen, and the characters have to do it the same way we would in real life.
Yeah. I mean, it gets to the point where sometimes I'm writing a scene and like I become a little emotionally uncomfortable with what I'm putting in there. And like I have to stop for a second. But then I come back to it and I'm like, okay, is this really the way that I would see this play out? And if it is, I'm like, I feel horrible for writing this sometimes, but this is what's going to make a real story. And that is what my readers and, what I as an author deserve to do, not just shortchanging, not just pandering, but like sometimes stuff gets messed up. It's just the way it is.
Yep. And that's what makes a good story. Not just because if it's just a magical fantasy fairy story, like everything's great and happy all the time, it is less interesting to a more adult reader, because we understand that life has consequences, and it's those emotional challenges and obstacles in life that create character growth. It's not just when everything's just magically happy, your character has no reason to progress or to become more stronger emotionally, physically, whatever you want to say. And so I think those challenges have to exist in a story.
They do. Sometimes people ask me, like I meet people and they find out that I'm an author and they say, well, can my son read this? He's 12 or he's 14. And I'm like, my books are like a little bit worse than Ghostbusters. And they're like, oh, well, that's fine. And I'm like, but think about what the jokes are actually saying in Ghostbusters. And you go, oh, well, no. It's like when you watch Ghostbusters as a kid, you're like, oh, this is a funny little thing about ghosts. And then you watch Ghostbusters as an adult, you're like, man, this is some sick, raunchy stuff that they're saying. And I never got it when I was younger.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
No, I had the same kind of questions about on my book. I'm like, a gentleman emailed me saying, oh, I love your book so much. I'm going to read it to my kid every day before bed. And, to get him interested in gaming. Apparently some kids have to get interested in gaming.
Yeah, I feel like that's the opposite. Shouldn't they like the gaming? You're trying to get them interested in books, but
I maybe the roles just switched around as I'm getting to become an old man or something. But that's the way it was for me too. Like gaming was just, I'd rather do that than reading or homework or television. And in this case, maybe it's not the case, but whatever. But his point was like, I want something for my kid, and I'm like, I guess my story is pretty clean. Like there's some curses in it, but there's no like super adult content. I've always in my mind said my character's probably not going to have any graphic sex. Like if you do sex, it's going to be, very much fade to black. Yeah. They go into whatever. But that's just, but I do understand that some authors have different points of views, and just because it's a video game or it's a world based in, a video game doesn't mean there's not necessarily going to be adult content. I mean, you ask, his name, Fuchs, I forget that's his last name, but he has a ton of LitRPG that's just really graphic erotica at the same time as LitRPG. I'm like, oh yeah, there's a mix there. There are adult video games. There's plenty of those in the world that exist as well. So there's precedent set for that kind of thing. And so just because it's video game stuff, not necessarily for kids necessarily, but it doesn't mean it's not either. Yeah, true. I mean, either way, it's fun, and it is.
Honestly, it's 2017. You're not going to be reading anything to your kid where they haven't seen something 10 times worse on the net. I mean, it's just the way it is.
The internet was my sex education program as well.
Yeah, I mean that and Channel 99 back when cable was a thing. So
No, we didn't have cable. I had a fuzzy pictures where all the wavy lines you're going to could only imagine.
Waited long enough. There was you got blessed every once in a while. You had to wait.
You got a nice shot, and you're like, oh, there you go. That's it.
That was it. Yeah, I mean, that was that's something that kids nowadays will never understand.
Nope, they will never understand. And it's like the freedom of the internet is just anything you want to know about, it's there, whether it's true or not.
Immediately.
Absolutely. Okay, now going back. Sorry, we keep getting sidetracked. On to your book 6. You're introducing, I think the last big battle was against was goblins, and you had a goblin shaman, and they're basically there's these cultural and territorial disputes next to the land, because as the mist field becomes more powerful, it's magically attracting more powerful enemies. It's a place of power, and so good and bad people are going to be attracted to that place of power and see it as a potential resource to be exploited for their own goals. So are you exploring more of that in this book, or what else can you tell us about book 6 without spoiling?
So the clash of the various settlements and powers that are fighting over finite resources, or like at least the best grade of resources, is very much like kind of a common theme through this book. There's more meat as far as sort of fighting and combat though than there was in book 5. Book 5 was more like kind of a slower, cerebral, expanding, getting to know the other characters kind of thing. This one is you're just kind of like hit the entire time, and it never slows down. It just keeps going. And whether or not you are dealing with the emotional turmoil of one of the characters, or just a very epic fight scene, or even like choices of like life and death that have very real consequences. It's nonstop in this book. So, I mean, whenever I discuss it, I always feel like my books are less like a trilogy like Lord of the Rings or something like that, where every movie is a self-contained little, thing, and much more like hour-long specials of something that you might follow, like Lost. And it's like, yeah, each book is like slightly self-contained, but I'm telling like part of the story through the eyes of the MC. But yeah, this one is just, you're kind of just going to start running from jump and not going to end until the last page kind of evens out.
I mean, you have, I believe, the first 4 chapters of your book, book 6, on your Patreon page available for everyone to read for free. I think you gave them out as special rewards as you were writing them to your subscribers, but they're all available for free now. So I peeked at them a little bit. I read book chapters 1 and 2 just to make sure Richter didn't die, or just fall into this magical pit of death as he was being left in book 5. And then I kind of petered off. I'm like, okay, but I definitely saw points of like, oh no, there's a whole another close by thing, which is going to be a battle, and it's going to go from there to there to there. So it's very interesting for me to hear that this is going to be more of a conflict driven book. Like you said, book 5 was definitely a lot of town maintenance, exploration of those aspects, because they kind of needed to be addressed, because you set them up in previous books, but you never really explored where they were going to go and how that's going to affect the community as a whole. And in book 5, you definitely cleaned up a lot of those kind of questions and resolved a lot of those ideas. And so in books, they very much, it seems like they're expanding outside the village. The story is expanding outside the village more.
Yeah, I mean, and that was always kind of the plan. Like the first book is about Richter, and then the next book is about like Richter and his little bit of village, and he meets some other people, and the third book is about like expanding what the village needs, and then fifth book is the village, and then now I'm like looking at like a larger macro scale where it's like the village versus another village, and sort of how that all plays out. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so thank you very much for letting us know. Was there anything else you wanted to let the readers know about book 6 before we move on to any kind of marketing review stuff?
I mean, I think you're just, I think they'll enjoy it. So, just be honest. I put my heart into it, but just let me know. I hope you guys
awesome. Yeah, we're definitely gonna have some questions from the audience a little bit later that are gonna address specific points that your readers have about book 6. So I don't want to ruin too many of those. Okay. But we did some other things to talk, because this is what our 4th interview together, I think. So we've talked about your author history and your writing schedule and style and all that good stuff. So we won't go into that. Instead, we'll talk about a few questions that have come up recently within the LitRPG community. Questions that new writers like myself have, and people who are just coming into the genre from other genres like romance or sci-fi or just straight fantasy, and they see LitRPG potentially as a new place for them to write their stories. I think there are a lot of questions that those people have as well. So we'll talk about those for a little bit. We'll begin with marketing and review. These are a few that I had, just because I am also an author and I like to have success as well. Your particular books are really super popular. You like, these are great reviews, and there's a ton of them. Like book 1 has almost 400 reviews on Amazon. Book 2 through 5 average about 200 reviews each. What do you do to get so many reviews, man?
I think part of it is just you have to. I mean, obviously, part of it's the product. If people don't like it, you'll get reviews, but you'll not enjoy it, because if you put a book out and you get 3 1 out of 5s, that's no one's really going to touch you again. But I think that you should just write a story that you would want to read, and ideally, there'll be other people out there that it resonates to, so they will be moved to do it. But I think the other point is just kind of being accessible and being like engaging. Like I'm just like, hey dude, let's get a beer kind of guy. So like when people like approach me, I'm like, yeah, what's up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm happy to answer your questions. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a review. And, it doesn't work a lot of times because, I didn't even understand the importance of reviews, even though I've read like thousands of books. And I never left one. I was like, review. And I'm like, where's the next book? And I just move on without ever really, really thinking about it. And I think that's the way a lot of people are. But, by putting, the time in, by putting the work in, by making connections with people, by, kind of being accessible like through the group and kind of just communicating, I find that people are very appreciative of that. And so like, yeah, a lot of times they're not going to leave a review, but they leave you one and then, someone leaves you another one and someone leaves you another one. It can add up. I think that, I joined like a bunch of writer groups when I started writing. And honestly, they made me want to shoot myself in the face. I felt like I was like a 15-year-old girl reading Cosmo thinking I'm not thin enough or something like that. It was just all kind of just angst and like, you're going to die, that you'll never succeed and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of realized that the truth is there's no one way to do it, but you have to kind of just put yourself out there, try something. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then you try something new, and then you try to communicate with positive people, and you try to X out the people that are kind of just going to drag you down. And it's a hustle, it's a grind, it's something that you have to invest yourself in. And for people that don't really want to connect or don't really like see themselves as the person that would do that, if you write, an amazing story, well, then maybe it'll speak for itself. But I think for most of us, it's about making a connection,
No, I absolutely agree. I think the big two pullaways from what you said are, one, the ability to connect to your audience. I think social media plays a really big part in this, actually, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Reddit or whatever. That almost instantaneous connection to someone that you love, as far as like a reader to an author.
Yeah.
Existed for such a long period of time. Before, if you want to talk to an author you liked, you'd send them a letter to the publisher, and the publisher might send it to the author, and then the author might respond. But it was like a 1 in a million shot. And especially in such a small community like ours, when someone PMs you saying, "Hey, I loved your book," I personally do. I always respond. No matter what time of the day it is, I'm like. Even if it's like I have 10 messages like, "Hey, thanks a lot for reading the book," blah, blah, blah. And it's also taking that extra step to just, saying back to them, "Thanks a lot. And if you like the book, leave a review." It's that simple step. But a lot of people won't take that extra effort because they feel like, oh, now they're imposing upon the reader. They're asking for favors from the reader. And in the sense that you are, because it benefits you. But for me personally, I had to start thinking like, no, I'm not really benefiting myself. I am, but it's more about letting other readers have the opportunity to see your story. Because if this group of readers is enjoying it, why shouldn't other people? And once I started thinking of it that way, it became less of a selfish motivation, and I'm a lot more likely to just make that simple request of like, oh, if you have a chance, leave a review. It helps other people find, the book that you happen to love so much. And a lot of readers are like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm more than happy to do it, even if it's just like, oh, I'll leave you 4 or 5 stars and whatever.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying what you want. In almost, any scenario, like, don't be a dick. Don't be like extremely overbearing or something like that.
Right.
But, just be like, oh, hey, this is what I'm about. And someone's like, oh, you're a horrible person. Be like, oh, okay. Not really, but sure. Thanks. See you later. Because, there are like, crazy people out there. For the most part, I think people are generally chill. And, you treat them with respect, they will treat you with respect. Simple as that.
Yeah, no, I agree. But again, I think social media just makes it easier to connect to your audience. And I think that's a great thing. I think it allows a lot of new people to just feel like they connect to their author, and that kind of devotion and love and enjoyment really creates a nice bond and that they're more likely to do you a solid and leave a review because it benefits everybody. So I think that's a great part of what you were talking about. So good advice.
Yeah, I've actually been able to speak to some like authors that I read growing up, which is like super cool. And one of the ones was Raymond D. Feist.
Ooh.
And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool, and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, well, sure, I guess, whatever. I'm just Raymond D. Feist. And I'm like, okay. And then I was like, can I ask you some questions? He was like, yeah. And I'm like, I asked him some questions about this and that and marketing, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, I wrote books 20 years ago. Facebook didn't exist. Quit bothering me. And I was like, thank you. That was awesome. That was great. Raymond D. Feist told me to stop bothering him. It was great. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I hear. I kind of found out the same way when I talk to authors that I really like when I'm doing this kind of stuff. Yeah. It's like very much like, oh, you're talking to me. I'm a reader, but I'm also, a fan, and we're chatting, and it's a cool experience that I don't think would have didn't exist. Even 10 years ago. It's just not something that was possible, and I think that's part of the draw for our communities, that we do this kind of stuff. We talk to each other, and having a central location like the LitRPG Facebook group, where authors and readers communicate very freely, it's kind of a cool thing. And I think that's part of the growth of our particular genres, that we have that kind of cool community. So I'm really happy about it. So moving on to a few other concepts. What else have you done to get the word out about LitRPG and your stories besides looking for reviews?
So I mean, it's kind of like moving under its own steam now, which is awesome. We're almost at 3,500 people in the group, which is very cool. But I mean, like, you've been there from the beginning. For 6 months, it was like 80 dudes just kind of talking about stuff, and I put in a lot of work back then. I mean, I remember I would spend 3 hours a day almost just like reaching out to like a Warcraft group, or like a Sword Art Online group, or Log Horizon group, or like I went on popular authors like forum pages, and I was like, hey, this is LitRPG, be our friend. And I spent like a lot of hours doing that. And I mean, slowly, like I said, other authors, everyone found their voices, and then just kind of asking people to chip in a little bit. It's like, hey, I really hope that the group is great for you. Would you mind putting a link at the back or something like that? And just the basic idea that a rising tide raises all boats. It's like, if we support each other, there's more for all of us. And maybe not at like this one given time, it's someone else's time to shine, but soon it'll be your time to shine. And the more we add in, and that has not been without its like trials or resistance. But again, there's just a lot of really good people that are like, yeah, let's do this together. Let's make something positive that benefits all of us. And I mean, so I have spent like hundreds of hours building it, but I've also only been able to build it by working with other awesome authors like you. I mean, and so now we're able to kind of not rest easy, because we're still young, but we're getting more people, and people are like, yo, dude, I read the coolest new book, check this out. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very much like he started the snowball at the top of the hill, and it's kind of gained its own momentum. And as far as like reaching out to the community, we've recently got a lot of interest from other writing groups who are taking notice of all the potential readerships within our community of enthusiastic geeks and LitRPG and VR enthusiasts, and people who are willing to pay a lot of money to read all these great stories that they love. So there's a lot of interest from outside communities, whether they're just authors who are looking for a new genre to write in, or people who are looking to pay their bills or whatever. But we can definitely see that there's a much larger growing interest around the LitRPG genre.
I mean, which is good and bad. I mean, and I think it just depends on the motivation of the writer. Like, if there's someone that is like, I feel like most of us were from the beginning, where it's like, oh my God, where's Dakota Zone? Where have you been all my life? This is amazing. How have I never thought of this before? And that's awesome, because they're going to be like, well, my favorite video game was Castlevania 360, and I'm going to write something like that, and it's going to be super cool and awesome. But if your motivation is just like, well, I feel like I can, churn out some crapola and whatever. I mean, that's obviously not as good, because as we're a growing genre, somebody says, oh, this is a LitRPG, I read that, and they're like, oh my God, this is horrible, I will never go back to LitRPG again. That's obviously a bad thing. I mean, the cool thing about it, though, is because we are a video game blended with literature group, and video gamers are like classically like ruthless.
Yeah.
People are quick to call out and be like, this is some BS. I did not want to read Twilight, blah, 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 blah. And they're like just real about it. And everyone else is like, all right, hands off. So I love that our community is passionate and is like protecting itself. I mean, I've just been so really delighted that I've been seeing people rise and fall based on, you know, just their merit, which is cool. And, you know, all of our readers are keeping us accountable, which, you know, I think is also exactly what we want.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's our the community, because there are such enthusiastic people. They're more likely to be vocal, either in reviews or in, you know, forum posts or, you know, messages, whatever. In that, oh, this is a good book that's saying they're lit RPG, but they're not really because of these reasons. And these, oh, have you seen this guy? He hasn't done any press, but he's really good, and he's online and he's free, or he's just hanging out on Amazon. He just came out today. Go give him some support because he's a great story. And you know, the community itself is almost, I don't want to say self-policing, but they're definitely referential in that they point out the good stuff and they say, oh, this guy's just doing this for money. And I think that's part of why we have this particular podcast is that to kind of help people see, oh, these are the great things, and these are the people who are saying they're lit RPG, but they're not quite getting it because they don't have the background information. They don't have 30 years of gaming experience to fall back on, and they're trying really hard, but they're not quite getting it. So maybe they'll try again later. And other people are just like, oh, these people are obviously just in it for the cash, and aware of that. And you know, so I think that's why I love doing the podcast, because I'm one of those people. I'm a lifelong gamer, lifelong fantasy, you know, VR enthusiast, and a bunch of other tech stuff. And I'm a super nerd and geek. And so I understand that mindset. And I think that resonates with a lot of other people within our community.
And it's so amazingly vindicating when you're writing a book that people enjoy, and you think of all the times that your mother yelled at you, like, this is a pointless waste of your time. And you're like, you don't understand. You don't understand. And it's so amazingly vindicating.
No, absolutely, yeah. As an author, I'm like, oh, look, all that gaming decades of experience, like it was just research time that I didn't know I was going to use for a book I'm writing.
Never. That's one of my favorite Family Guys, where it turns out that like Lois had sex with like the lead singer from Styx, and they're interviewing at the end. They're like, "Do you have any and the guy's like, "Dude, I can't believe you slept with the lead singer from Styx. Do you have any advice for the girls back home?" And she goes, "Well, you never know who's going to be famous, so I just say spread it around, girls. That's what I say." It's just like, also funny. Stay cool, girls. Good things.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So thanks very much. We are going to move on to just my last little bit of questions. So I was going to ask you, do you do any kind of advertising? Like, do you like paid advertising or guerrilla marketing?
I've done a little bit. Unfortunately, I'm woefully ignorant about exactly how Google Analytics works. Like, I know that it's a thing, but I don't really know it as much. I've been able to do awesome cross promos with, you know, very cool authors, which, you know, can help. And, you know, again, that's that kind of like, you know, rising tide raises all boats. What I've read, though, is, you know, I mean, it's indies versus publishers is kind of the way it seems like it comes out. It's like, you know, we are, you know, struggling to like, you know, make a name for ourselves, and the publishers kind of, you know, they hold all the keys to the kingdom. I mean, it's very much like we're like a merchant class against the established nobility, and, you know, they would absolutely crush us if they could. So as far as, I mean, it's very disillusioning thinking about like exactly how you become a New York Times bestselling author when you read these articles. I mean, again, it's like one of those things where it's like, you don't want to know because it makes you want to like slit your own, you know, wrist. But like, just like the massive amount of like capital that's invested in like launching certain books and blah, blah, that you could never, ever compete with. Right. And you just have to really rest on the quality of your product and say like, man, I really hope that you guys will, you know, go on this journey with me. So like, I mean, I've done a little bit here and there. In the last like 2 months, I've started doing like the Amazon kind of advertising thing.
Yeah, I just started that myself. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean, that's definitely like going at like a loss, more or less. And I'm kind of just hoping that like people that, I'm only advertising my first book, and I'm like, well, I hope that, they will read my successive books, and then it can kind of like, balance out. But honestly, it's kind of just one of those things where it's like almost like a fire and forget missile. Like, I hope this is doing something good and I'm not just wasting money. But I mean, like, again, I would say that for the most part, it's really just about like making connections with people. Like my readers, I know them so well at this point that I'll be like, hey, I know that you were going to like, Cancun. How did that go? And he's like, oh yeah, such and such and such and such. And it's gotten to that point, and I don't think that you can, ever really, put a price or, trade that kind of thing. But the other question is like today, right before I got on, a guy had reached out to me because he only buys books through iTunes. He's like, yo, man, I really loved your book, but I don't know how to buy things on Amazon. I've never done it. And just walking him through that. And he's like, oh, thanks. Really appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. And then, that's someone who will hopefully stick with me through my saga. I mean, I feel like that's more effective than anything that I've done, probably.
Yeah, I agree. Just like I said, in the age of social media, I think that I don't think we would have the opportunity to be as successful as indie writers if social media didn't exist as a free way of connecting to your communities and to your readers, because otherwise you would have to go through trade magazines, you'd have to go through other traditional media outlets, and that is a huge investment of capital, like you mentioned, and only larger publishing house have that much money to throw at a project. But also means that they have to be super selective at which projects they throw that money at.
And they also have the metrics to know what to do. And like there's
what works, what doesn't.
So I mean, it's the kind of thing where if you look at it objectively, you're like, yeah, I'm sure that there's things that I could be doing to maximize my exposure and blah blah blah. But I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You try something. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, you move on, and don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, don't be afraid to try new things, and don't be afraid to fail. Because I mean, to try these new things, like whether you're advertising through Fiverr or through Google Ads, AdWords, and or through Amazon, you don't have to invest like a lot of capital to test it out to see if it works for you. You can spend $5, $10, $15, $20 sometimes, and you can get, because they give you information back to you, whether like how many people clicked on this thing, how many people transitioned from clicking on it to purchasing. All that information is available to you. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you can very well see, if I spend this much money, I get my maximum output. And if I go beyond that, it's just not paying off as well. And so you can kind of figure it out after you test it out for a while. For me personally, I've had good responses to Facebook ads as far as like getting eyeballs on your stuff. Twitter ads, not so much. Because I've done advertising for the podcast, whether it's Geekbots or LitRPG Podcast. I've invested some time in as far as like exploring those particular avenues, and you can pay for Facebook to do advertisements, and they do a relatively good job of like matching you to the people who share your interest of your group. It's just they're not necessarily going to be the most enthusiastic. Like the grassroots marketing that we do, in that we include links in your books to the group, that to me is a lot more effective, because that these people are enthusiasts about your stuff already. They purchased your book, they read the entire 300-400 pages, and then at the end of that, they even read the back stuff. And so you know inherently that they're more enthusiastic. And so when they join your group, when they look at your stuff, you know that you have a much more potent audience member than just somebody who's just like, I'm casually interested, I'll click like on it. As far as like Amazon goes, personally for me, I've only started testing it right now, and I found that there are two versions of the Amazon advertising. There's one where it's on the listing, like when you're doing a search, they'll do a sponsored search page essentially, and that one is pretty easy to test out. For me, it didn't really work though. Like the little money I invested in got me no responses whatsoever, and so I'm like, doesn't work. But now the second version of that is where they try to match you as a recommendation for interest searches. That one seems to have gotten me a few purchases at least. So I'm like, that one's sort of working. And then just have to figure out at what price point and what price per click is going to maximize like the maximum exposure for the least amount of dollars, and still at least pay for itself on a daily basis or whatever.
It's like super frustrating, basically.
Yeah, but at least they give you the numbers so you can be frustrated and know what's frustrating you.
And informed. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on like how much time you want to invest in it. You know, like I've talked to other authors that are like, "Oh, I'm going to release, my next book at like this time of year on this whatever with this lunar alignment because blah, blah, blah." And it's like, all right, yeah, I mean, I believe you, or you could just release it because it's ready, and sort of see what happens. I don't know.
No, I absolutely. In some respects, a lot of that is like, oh, it's like their experience based upon, the 12 or 15 books they put out. Like, oh, if I put it out this time of the year, I do better than this time. But there's no real, it's all very anecdotal. It's not hard numbers based. Based on a wide sampling of like 150 authors. We just don't have those kind of numbers because we're not publishers. And again, that's the downside of being an indie publisher or a self-publisher, is that you don't have people who dedicate their whole job to advertising and promotion. It's just you. And so those kind of things, like I'm always a little wary, like listening to that kind of advice, because I don't know if they have actual numbers.
And I would warn new authors to be careful of like what they believe. When doing stuff on these writer groups, because there are like malignant people that like intentionally give you bad advice. Which I didn't at first, but it's like how do you have that much time in your day to do this? But like it's absolutely true. And even when it's like an honest conversation with like 100 people like involved, 50 of them are saying one thing and 50 of them are saying another, and it's just like I don't know, whatever.
No, I hear you. And it's advertisements like that. It's like, oh, what works for one person doesn't for another, and mailing lists or not mailing lists. I'm like, I'm kind of starting to get into the same things you were talking about before. It's like a bunch of different advertising advice that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And it's just, instead of focusing on all that stuff, we're spending quite so much time on that. I'd rather just write my story and do the podcast and read a bunch of books and review them and do all those other things that I kind of do to create content for my community, instead of just focusing on a bunch of wasted effort and figuring out the best way of advertising. I agree. I mean, if anyone knows, tell me. But other than that, no, we're good. Yeah, if somebody has the magic formula, please spread it around. We're more than happy to get it from you. Oh,
come on.
Okay, moving on to our last part of marketing review, the questions that I had for you. You have a Patreon. Now, for people who don't know, a Patreon is a way for community members to support an author or a writer or a music producer or a content maker or whatever on a subscription model basis. Like they basically give you money on a monthly basis to help you do the thing that you love to do, basically. Whether it's a podcast like ours, we have a Patreon, or a writer thing like you do. It's just kind of a way for fans and enthusiasts to say, hey, here's some money, go do what you're going to do. And sometimes you offer rewards. So now, why did you create your Patreon, and what kind of system did you set up? Like what kind of tiers, what kind of reward systems, what kind of goals do you have for your Patreon?
I mean, so when I first made it, I was like, I just kind of looked at, various social media things, and somebody had listed it, and I was like, oh, well, that seems like a fun little idea. And I honestly didn't really think too much about it. It kind of just sat there for a good number of months. And then, I started like, just making like, tiers where it was like, I think if you give me $1, you get a spiritual high five. At $2, like you get a high five, then it comes back down to the bottom or something like that. And honestly, I have kind of seen a big rush since I started emailing out to my newsletter recently. And one of the biggest ones is I kind of just decided to like put myself out there. I had a very interesting experience over New Year's, which is it's kind of long. I don't want to waste your time going into it now. But it really kind of was just something that like moved me and bothered me like on an emotional and spiritual level. And I wasn't really sure if I was going to put it out there. And then I was like, you know what? If I'm going to be like honest with my fans, like why not? And free therapy, so that's cool. So I wrote this like long, newsletter about the experience and kind of the conclusions and stuff that I'd come from it. And the result was like overwhelming. Like I had people like, write me back like from various faiths, like, quoting things from either, the Bible or the Quran. I had people that were like, something really similar happened to me and I went the other way and I regret it. And I have other people that were like, I did something similar and it kind of bit me on the butt, but at the same time, I'm happy that people are willing to do X, Y, or Z. And, since then I feel like I've I think people just kind of want to connect. I mean, the same thing that I was saying before. And, you know, by putting yourself out there, some people are just going to hate you. And that's just the way it is. And you're going to get, like, you know, bile and vitriol from them. But I honestly believe that for the most part, like, people are cool. People are wanting to, like, you know, have a discussion with you. And so that's kind of, I think, been the secret to my Patreon getting a lot better. And then also, like, you know, some of the rewards where it's like, I've started, excuse me, putting up sample chapters for people that, you know, wanted to get something early. And I think people kind of enjoy that too. I mean, not everyone, like some people just really never want to, you know, spoil a book for themselves, but people, you know, don't. And I think there's, you know, a market and whatever for, you know, both sides of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Patreon is a great way to directly connect to your readers, just your group of supporters.
Yeah.
It's just another platform. It's enhanced social media, I think, in a lot of respects. But I think yours in particular, I think yours is one of the most successful Patrons within the LitRPG community. I think they're putting out about you have 7 Patreon supporters who are giving like something like $1,000 a month or something, just to help you, you know, motivate you to read or to write and to communicate. And like that's really good. I'm like my Patreon on behalf of the Geek Bites and LitRPG Podcast is like $67 a month, and I'm like, yay! I'm like, this is paying for itself in a lot of ways. And I had to personally, just like I kind of forgot that I had goals set of like $30 a month at max, and so like $60. I'm like, oh, I should probably write some new goals. You know, to keep things going. So I had to like at $60, like revamp the artwork for the LitRPG podcast, which you talked about a little bit, like just making a higher quality production. And like at $100 a month, it's like, oh, I can go to a con or something, whether it's Dragon Con or whatever. It's like just little things like that for the fans, like, oh, they can kind of share the experience and help support you as far as like reaching a particular goal, and them also sort of coming on the journey with you in your success. When they can contribute to your success as a supporter, they also in that way I think feel successful, because like I helped them get there, and I'm sharing in the rewards a little bit, whether it's a free chapter or an early release of the chapter or an early release of the book, whatever it is. They also feel rewarded for their support in the content you provide them. And
I mean that's really the, you know, the whole point, like, you know, like rewarding people for, you know, joining you on that journey with you, whether it's in the early chapters or whether it's like, hey, I'm going to make this like really cool new graphic that I was putting off because, you know, it was a little bit prohibitively expensive, but like, I appreciate you guys. Here you go. I think the recurring theme of a lot of what we're saying is kind of taking a longer view and looking at the bigger picture, as opposed to a short-term goal or a short-term, you know, yield, or like, you know, let me make a lot of money right now. Let me do whatever I can right now. And I think people can understand and respect that. If you kind of like just open yourself up, if you engage with your readers, if you know, make like a cool new artwork and you're like, hey, this is just for you guys, thank you so much, blah, 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 then I think people like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to like,
you and I spoke about this is my little gift to Ramon. We'll be getting the JPEG later, but it's just it's a PC man getting it over some Xboxes and PlayStations. So
is that supposed to be like, is that Conan the Barbarian, I think?
Conan the Barbarian with a computer monitor for a head, and he's crushed every other console.
Yeah, instead of the skulls of his enemies, I think. Yeah. I recognize that. That's pretty cool, man. But yeah, I think it comes down to like creating a community versus just creating a product. And then creating a product is fine, and that should be the basis of your thing, because they have to have something to read and to like. But creating that community in a way is sometimes harder, because you have to nurture it and you have to provide things for them to look at and view and to absorb on a regular basis. It's not just I'm producing a book once every 3 or 4 months, and you never hear from me in between. I'm in my cave, and in the age of social media, where you're expected to have a regular communication with your community, that doesn't quite work, because that community needs to be fed. Otherwise, they're just going to go to somewhere else where they are getting that connection to either their author or to fellow readers or to people who share an interest. And I think once you have the community, they're rabid enthusiasts. And I think I've said this before. I'd rather have 10 people who are super enthusiastic about the things that I love than 100 or 1,000 people who are just casually interested in my thing, because those 10 people will spread the news. They will pay for all your stuff because they love you and they love your work. And those are the people that you kind of try to create a community around.
I absolutely agree, dude. And I mean, everything that you've done for the last year has helped, the group, the community so much. And I think that's what it's really about. Like, people have asked me, like, why are you called the, father of American LitRPG? And it's like, I'm happy that my books have become like a staple of the genre, but it's really has been like, the hundreds of hours that, we've worked together, the hundreds of hours that I've reached out to like whoever else, like the articles that I've written, like the newsletter. I mean, it's just, it's really about like whether or not you care, I guess. And if you do, that's going to come through in your writing. That's going to come through in your interactions with people. That's going to come through in, everything, the general gestalt of who you are. Right. If you do not, I think that people will probably pick up on that fairly quickly, which is good.
And they do. Yeah. And that's the other part of just like they pick up on your enthusiasm, they also pick up on your lack of enthusiasm and your just casual regard, which is fine if you're not super enthusiastic. Nobody says you have to be, but be aware that, the audience realizes that the same way that they do if you're a super nerd.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. So, I mean, some of the conversations and the times that you kind of have to lay it on the law to protect it is not the most fun, but it's completely worth it. Yeah. Still love this genre. I mean, I fell in love with it a year ago, and I don't know, it's become such a cornerstone of like who I am and my life and how I live my life and how I spend my time and the things that I discuss and, the people that I interact with. I mean, that is who you are.
And absolutely, I hear exactly what you're saying. LitRPG has become, I probably spend more time with LitRPG books than I do with my family and my job. So, and that's just, you love the things that you love, and that's what you spend your time on, whether it's reading, writing, creating content, whatever it is. So I hear you, man. Okay, so we're going to move on to the state of LitRPG. We have a couple questions. Okay. To get your viewpoint on how we are as a genre currently. Like you said, it's been about, for me, a couple years in the genre. And again, I've seen it go from just a few books on Amazon, mostly stuff online, translated stuff from other countries, on Novel Updates or Royal Road or Wattpad or whatever, to weekly updates, weekly publishing on LitRPG on Amazon on a regular basis. I'm personally, because I review these things, I'm reading 3 to 4 books a week generally, and new stuff that's coming on Amazon, and sometimes that goes up as much as 8 books a week, and which was what it was in December, where there were 8 books coming out almost every week in December, except for that first week where I kind of lucked out where I published. I'm like, oh yeah, nobody else is. But it's becoming more and more people, as the genre goes, more authors are saying, oh, this is a thing. I also love video games, or I can also write in this genre, and they're putting out stuff. The Facebook group that you kind of run is the LitRPG Facebook group, and you've reached, I think you said, almost 3,500 members.
Almost 3,500, yeah.
And so we have so much interest in the genre. What do you think about the state of LitRPG as a larger idea or a community?
Let's see. We're strong. We're stronger together. I mean, honestly, I think you said most of it. A year and a half ago, I felt like I was, I don't know, like just begging in the street for more LitRPG. I was reading the equivalent of Chandel 99 porn, like with some of these translations, where it's like it was barely English, but I was still reading it because I really wanted to know it, even though some of them were really good. Some of them were just like, oh my God, what I'm guessing what you're saying. I'm basically creating a story myself. And now it's I made that the list on my website, and I'm like, it took me like 2 hours to do that. And it's because there's so many of these books out there, which is great. And I mean, they may not be 100% my taste or whatever, but that's also a good thing, where I think that as before, people would come into LitRPG and be like, okay, well, let me read the same story again, just written by a different person. Now we really are getting these different flavors. We're getting anti-heroes. We're getting, epic. We're getting settlement building. We're getting things we're starting to see a larger growth into the sci-fi as opposed to just predominantly fantasy, which is what we've done so far. I just think that that's really great. And then also, we're seeing a lot of expansion to, not just my group, but, there are other groups out there too, which have a different, feel and bent to them, which I think is a very good thing. We have our first female author, which is awesome. This has been a sausage fest for like a long time. I haven't been able to read her book yet, but just the fact that there is a woman doing it, I enjoy the fact that exists. And then I've also had other people of color reaching out to me, some black guys, guys from Israel. I've had some Asian people that are like, hey, I'm interested in doing this, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool too. I like that we are creating a group that is becoming more diversified as we're growing, and I think that's really important to keep us from stagnating and just kind of having the same story told by different people. So
yeah, absolutely. Just as like there's many gaming experiences out there in the world, there can be as many lit RPG stories. I do want to make a small correction. We have multiple female authors in the genre, a couple of which have published, but it's a very small percentage of authors currently, and I'm hoping that opens up a lot more. But there are just more than one. There are a couple on Amazon and on the Royal Road. I just wanted to point that because they're going to get mad.
I was including just ones that are published, not necessarily the Royal Roads. Yeah, there's a lot over there that will probably be coming out into the scene, probably in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months. I definitely hope it's good. Those stories are very interesting. A lot of times in a different way. It's just a different perspective that I can't write. I'm a dude. My experiences have been from my position of, my narrative, my life story, basically. And I can kind of empathize and see other people's perspectives, but I can't tell their story because I haven't lived that life necessarily. And maybe that's a limitation as a writer that I have, because I'm not that awesome of one. But I also appreciate other people's stories, which is what you're talking about. The diverse group of gamers in the world goes across all boundaries, all nationalities, all ethnicities, sexualities, whatever it is. And so each one of those communities has a story to tell. Their experiences are all going to be different. And I think our genre very much lends itself to being welcoming to those different stories, because we can all connect on the same level of love of video games, love of RPGs, love of virtual reality or fantasy, sci-fi, whatever it is. Yeah. And we're welcoming of those particular viewpoints and stories. And I love that about our community. I agree. I absolutely agree. I didn't know that when I first started. I thought video games were for guys, and every once in a while there was that one cool girl that wanted to hang out. But since I've been doing research, or when I was reaching out to groups, there's a World of Warcraft group that has 50,000 people, and it's only women that are allowed in. And it's whoa, that's huge. There are a lot of women that are very much entrenched in this. And then you look at the statistics, it's almost 30 to 40% of gamers online these days are women, and it's wow, that's mind blowing. I think that'd be really cool to have more kind of just conversations where you can call someone a dick whether they have a dick or not, and it's all good. That's positive things.
Yeah, or you can call some dude a vag, and that's equally acceptable.
Nomenclature. There, yeah, probably will be from time to time. Yeah, so
yeah, absolutely. Okay, okay. Last question in the State of LitRPG section. Again, we have a bunch of new authors coming in. Yeah. I'm assuming that for this question that they have the best intentions at heart. They want to write a good LitRPG story for the community. They love the genre. So making that assumption, what kind of advice would you want to give to either new LitRPG authors or people coming from other genres who want to write in LitRPG?
So I guess the first advice I would give is just start writing. My own book, my own magic system, I had an idea of where I wanted it to go, but the number of times that I was writing my first book where I would wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, oh my God, that's the greatest idea ever. And I would furiously write it down and then come sit at my laptop and I'd be like, oh, well, I got to throw out all this other crap. And I would just start from the beginning. But I was able to make a system that is unique to me and reflective of the way I would want magic to work in my world. So, that only happened because I wrote. So, that's one thing. Two, it's don't try to pander. Really write a story that you would want to read, that you would be proud of, and let the chips fall where they may. Because you don't really know what, someone else is going to like. And if your book is like everyone else's, like our group is, I would say, honestly, it's unique in social media with the blending of authors and writers and the accountability and the support that's up there. So, I mean, it's almost like a high stakes, table in Vegas where like you can win really big or you can crap out and you're not really sure which roll of the dice is going to do which. So you might as well have fun and write something that you believe in rather than just trying to, I don't know, write some crap. Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that's a really good piece of advice, and just writing the thing that you want to read yourself. I do think that within the community, that does imply though that they've read LitRPG before. So there are some assumptions there. For people who are enthusiasts in the genre, I think that's an amazing bit of advice, because they have the basis of this is what LitRPG story the kind of literature that I love reading. This is what I can write. And I think that applies very well to them. For people who are coming from other genres who maybe have never read LitRPG or aren't big gaming enthusiasts, I don't know that it's as good as first making the effort to research your community and research the LitRPG and literally just diving into it and falling in love with it if you can. I think that's probably going to be the best piece of advice you can give, because if they're writers, they obviously have the skills to write things. If they have 7 or 8 or 9, 10 books, they have writing skills. So they already have a leg up on a lot of people like myself who have never written anything before. They're already better. It's just that when I don't want to say this, when I've read stories from people who are just stepping into the genre as their first book, you can tell a lot of times because they're hesitant about including game mechanics or referencing, background information about like story stuff, like, oh, this is how characters are set up, or including a character screen, and just talking to people who are on, the Facebook group or other communities, like authors are really worried about getting just the right balance of game mechanics without, losing like real readers, like real fantasy or sci-fi readers. I'm like, no, you have to think of the gaming system as a character. You have to describe it. You have to, expand upon their actions. You have to think of, you wouldn't have a main character that you didn't describe at all. You would tell details about their clothing, their motivations, their actions, their emotional states. And in a lot of ways, the game world is a character in that respect. And so you have to devote just as much time as you would to a regular character. You have to describe, how the game works, all the intricacies. You don't necessarily have to talk about all the possible permutations, but you do have to describe at least, how stats work, if you're going to include them, how health works, damage works, all those different things that come up from that we as gamers kind of take for granted, like, of understanding, because we've had 10, 20, 30 years of experience in RPGs or video gaming experience. We expect those things to be at least told to us, so we understand the game world and love it as much as we do the other characters in the story. And I don't think that people who aren't already enthusiasts in LitRPG understand that, because they come from a different background where the world is a place that the story exists, like in a fantasy or a sci-fi world, and it's not its own interesting character on its own. Like me personally, I could read a whole story just about somebody describing the game world and all the mechanics and the skill trees and the magic trees. I would be really happy about that. I would be perfectly fine. I've read tons of Dungeons and Dragon manuals and D20 manuals where that's all they do, and I'm like, this is fun. I just want a cup of tea and a cold day and to read a Dungeons and Dragons manual, and that's cool for me, and that's part of the draw of the genre. So I think doing that research is a great foundation, because once they get that understanding of it, then they already have the skills to tell a good story.
Yeah. The question is, like, what is your goal? I guess if your goal is to, like, honor, like, a cool genre that you found and to add something to it, then you will take the time to, like, read some books. If your goal is to make a quick buck, then you won't, but it will probably come through in your reading, and, it will definitely come through in the reviews and stuff that you get. So, I feel like like I said, there's a checks and balances for it, which is good.
Yeah, and absolutely. I talked to new authors who have written other things like fantasy, and they're like, I never knew how much I wanted to write this genre, and they do really well because they either have had the 20 years of gaming experience, and so they have that to draw on for their stories, or they're just like, I'm willing to just dive headlong into this genre and read the 300 books. Like me personally, I mean, I've read at least 300 books in this last year within the community, just because that's what I do. I'm a reader first, then I'm a podcaster and a book reviewer, and then I'm an author at the very end of this whole process. And so that's the things I draw on as a writer. But it's, if you don't have that background and all of those things to build upon, it's a lot more challenging, I think, than new writers coming from other genres kind of realize. And
it should be about that. Since we've had like an influx of writers that have been finding out about it over the last month, I've had to rework the rules of the LitRPG group, simply to say like, hey, we are a reader-based group about the joy of the genre. Like, don't ask a bunch of crowdsourcing questions. Don't try to like figure out the mechanics. Don't just try to jump to exactly whatever people kind of like so that you can regurgitate it back onto a page. And I mean, there are plenty of other writing groups or other groups out there that may cater to that, but like I've had to like draw like a very firm line with people about it, and sometimes they're like very unhappy because they're just trying to again get a check. And as annoying,
I sort of understand. I mean, they're authors; they got to pay their bills. They're full time. So yeah, I understand that, but it's like at the same time, I want to be protective of our community because I don't want to be exploited in that respect necessarily. I mean, if you write a good story, I don't care why you do it. Sometimes, if it's an amazing story and you don't really care about LitRPG, but it hits all the points that I love, great.
And you wrote a good story.
Yeah, you wrote a good story, and you're just an amazing author who's skilled at a trade. Like, I don't think a house builder necessarily has to love houses to be good at their job. And for some people, being a writer is sort of a job. Like maybe they love some other genre that got them into it, and this is just a thing to pay the bills. But if they create a great story, great. But you still have to do that foundational work.
I absolutely agree. For me personally, it's not just about the story though, but like I am like just so very proud and blessed like to have made these books. But I also feel very much the same way about making the Facebook community. I mean, it's a very common thing that somebody put a comment like, this is the only positive place that I can come. It's really great finding people that have similar interests to me. I really appreciate the fact that, we can sort of like talk about these things. It's an outlet that I don't necessarily have because I used to be a gamer, but, then X, Y, and Z happened. Yeah. So like, I jealously guard it to like kind of walk that line between like, supporting authors and whatever else like that, but it's always going to be very reader-based for me, which I think translates as well to the authors that flourish in the group are the ones that are about the genre and are about the readers and are about whatever else. I don't know. So I mean, I agree. You got to make it good.
I said that's the only reason that I had any literary success is because of the community, and I think they just kind of appreciate the things that I do to provide content for them, reviews, podcasts, author interviews, an exhaustive recommendation page of LitRPG that Amazon just isn't doing. So I'm filling the void in that respect, and having a searchable database of LitRPG stuff on our at our page or whatever. But like that's for me. I mean, that's hundreds of hours of work over the course of like the last year, like putting together these reviews and recommendation lists and databases. And I think the audience is like, thanks, man. I'll read your book on Kindle Unlimited, and but that's part of being a good member of the community and having that community support you. Because I know I'm personally my rating isn't amazing. It's not George R. Martin. It's not Stephen King, but it's a good enough story that people are like, oh, I connect with this. I like this, and I'll buy your next book. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think your writing is quite fun, Ramon. Quite fun. So don't sell yourself so short, man.
Okay, we are going to move on to questions from the audience. We've been talking already for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, an hour and a half.
Yay! I love talking to you. But I want to get to the reader questions about your story and some of the things. We are going to begin with Shane Smith. He asks, "Will this one, referring to book 6, end in a cliffhanger too?"
Yeah. What was the question?
Okay, Shane Smith asks if book 6 is going to end in a cliffhanger.
Probably not. Probably not. It's probably not. So
he isn't promising though, folks. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. We'll have to read it and wait and see. Okay, next question. Brandon Jacobson asks, he just says, tell him I said hi. So
what up, Brad?
There you go. Okay, on to Andrew Johnson Linus. Yeah, he actually has 2 questions for you. 1, will we ever find out who keeps on saying gnomes rule?
It's possible. Yeah, it's going to come up.
Okay, there you go. Second question, is there a chance that sometime in the future that the damaged, grayed out, or inaccessible section of the religion/deities in the Mist Village interface will become accessible? That's a really detailed question, by the way.
So anything is possible in the land. And in book 6, there are 1 or 2 things that touch on that. So
there you go. Good job, Andrew. Sort of an answer to your question.
Yeah.
Okay, Jay Taylor asks, what is the average airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
I mean, is it African or European? That's kind of what you need to know.
Oh, I like the version of it where it's like, is this a Mist Village magical sparrow? Because that definitely changes things.
Yeah, it does. It does. And whether or not, it's carrying a coconut. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it goes with average airspeed velocity. I'm like, okay, I guess I get that. But do you have an answer for that at all?
Well, it's it's a Monty Python Quest for the Holy Grail kind of reference.
Okay.
So, I mean, slower than an eagle, definitely. A brisk walk if it's drunk, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, there you go, folks. Okay, on to Robert Hudson. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if it were working for Richter and under his direct influence / bonuses?
Aha, got it. So if by woodchuck you mean, a lot. So
there you go. A lot. Yeah. That's an official game reference. You can count it as canon.
Yeah.
Okay, on to Brandon Hughesley. Will No Mercy be shown to kobolds, or will Richter use the egg?
No Mercy.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's spelled GNO.
Yep.
MERCY for the folks at home who can't read what I'm reading. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So, is Richter going to use the egg at some point?
The egg definitely comes in. It was a very important plot device for me, and it's going to be kind of a central, point to a lot of things, actually, as time goes on.
Okay. I was thinking like, oh, that's how he's going to rule the kobolds is through the use of the egg, and he's going to create a great like army, almost instantaneous army to protect the egg or, its ruler or whatever the case is. That's my little thing saying, oh, is that where the story's going?
Well, the most important thing to remember about Richter is that he's a chaos seed. So no matter what he does, it makes things less stable than before.
Okay. There we go. Okay. So in other words, you're not getting a direct answer, but he's going to come back to it later. Okay.
It's very important plot device. Yeah.
Josh Holmes asks, do gnomes in fact rule?
They do, Josh. They roll. Yeah.
Okay. Greg McGubbin, will we ever see another chaos? I think that's a question I've asked you every single book that we've had an interview on, and your answer is generally the same. Sure, at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the other chaos seeds are very much like part of the world. But you have to remember, this is something the size of Jupiter, and it's been 5 months. That's it. It's been 5 months. And Richter is like, some weird survivalist dude that's just in the forest all the time. It's not overly surprising that he hasn't run into one yet.
Okay, but there are other chaos seeds in the world somewhere on Jupiter.
Absolutely chaos seeds.
Okay. Can you? I don't think I've ever asked you how many chaos seeds exist in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what point in time you're talking about. So he was one of the first ones.
Okay, I'm like, now?
So now, probably several thousand.
Okay. So so more have been added over time, basically, and they're continuing to be added.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's definitely a more detailed answer than I was expecting this time around. Ardo Richardson asks, is Richter not worried about his looming promise to avenge his fallen villagers?
So he absolutely is, but he has a year to get it done, and he's putting things in place. He's like the head of a small village that's trying to fight a conglomeration of enemies. So, he doesn't want to just run over there and get his butt whooped. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So he still has about 7 months left?
So he's been in the world for 5 months. He's only been, that oath was made like 3 months in. So
okay, so 9 months. Got it. Okay, so we still have a couple more books where he has to get it done at that point. Okay,
doesn't mean he's going to wait until the time limit runs out, but he's got to get some things, put away.
I wasn't sure if he's going to be like a procrastinator like I was in college, or was like always having those last minute deadlines.
Well, he was very much like that at first, but then bad things happen to him, so he's learning from his mistakes.
Hey, that's always a good way to roll. Okay, on to Craig Fletcher. Craig asks, is Richter going to get his groove on with that sexy elf from the magic shop in Yebus?
Yes, he is.
There you go. Straightforward answer. Matthew Nelson asks, will the main character, Richter, I'm assuming, ever be strong enough to smack the bitch out of Nexus, or will he just have to admit he is outmatched? I don't get this last part of it, and get a straw.
And get a straw?
Yeah.
I don't understand that reference.
Me either, but I figured
anything's possible in the land. He is definitely nowhere that strong now, especially not in Nexus's own realm, which makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Caleb Hood, this is a related question. What would happen if Richter managed to get the slave collar on Nexus?
Would the rules and magical enchantments that worked on Richter's dimension necessarily work in Nexus's dimension? And where is he getting the collar on? I think these are all kind of things you would need to know to answer that.
Yeah, that's what I figured too. Like Nexus exists in a dimension in which he has absolute control of. So like the slave collar magic wouldn't necessarily work
Not necessarily.
if he were assuming he could get it on in the first place.
Assuming Nexus was even small enough to get it on.
Yeah. I figure it's one of those trick the genie kind of things in getting the slave collar on. But at that point, does the magic work?
Yeah, Nexus is not a moron. He's not going to let Richter come at him like this. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So.
Yeah, I imagine one of those like genie scenarios like, oh, I don't think you could fit into this collar with your absolute magical power. And Nexus is like, I can. Yeah.
Really dumb genies. It's really dumb genies. Yeah.
So okay.
Maybe they were just into bondage. Maybe they weren't dumb. Maybe they were just, that's kind of that was their kink.
That would be. It's a very interesting take on the whole genie thing. That was just because they're immortal beings. They live forever, so they're gonna get bored, and so they might want to explore some different avenues of interest.
I don't want my wife yelling at me about it. If I'm on this collar, it's not my fault. Done. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they just want to relax from their high stress positions of absolute power and take a more submissive role because it allows it to lose control, and it works for them. Hey, whatever works for you. No judgments here.
Freak flag flies. That's what I say.
That's what I say. Okay. Next question from Steven Sear. Why does Richter dual wield? Dual wielders are so much more prone to cutting their own wrist than the enemy. Nah, just kidding. Half just kidding. It's true historically that it didn't happen.
Well, I mean, dual wielding is like super cool. So everybody knows
that's what it comes down to. I understand. Yeah, it comes down to it was cool. I loved it. Indrid Stewarden, another fantasy story. So throw it in there. Yeah, I get you. Yeah. That's the whole reason we kind of write this stuff is like because it's cool. It's fun. Yeah. It's part fantasy. It's not just all game mechanics.
Yeah,
it's also just a little bit of for fun fantasy stuff.
Yeah, you just put it out there because it's enjoyable. Yeah.
Okay. There you go, Steven. Keith McGill asks, will Raiders actually have Raiders?
Raiders is actually what's going to be happening in Raiders. I will also say there was a Swarm in Swarm. There also was a Forge in Forging.
Yes, well, you did this to yourself, man. Once you started that trend of like not
in alliances. I'm just just saying.
I gotta say, this questioning just comes from her own writing, tropes, man. You started this where like the title of the book didn't necessarily have anything to do with like the actual thing that's happening in the book necessarily. So
no, there are definitely Raiders, and you phased out for a second. Did I just see you dressed as like a Nacho Libre kind of character? Like you were a wrestler?
Oh no, that was a Google snafu, but that's actually my friend Edgar Acosta. He does the Geek Bites podcast with me. He's actually a professional wrestler or an amateur wrestler for a number of years,
Okay,
And so
cool.
he would actually wrestle in rings like that, and he still does it occasionally. But he's older. He's a father now, so he doesn't do it quite as much. But that's our cut. I'm the nerd with the pi symbol on my shirt with all the pi numbers, and he's the guy wrestler.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Okay, on to our last question from Taryn Matharu, who's actually an author of the Summoner series online. He's been interested in writing in the genre, so I'm like, oh, okay. His question is, what is the future of LitRPG, and how can we build awareness of the genre?
So, I mean, the future is that more people are just going to find out about it and fall in love with it, and that's what's going to happen. It's inevitable. Video games are going to be a $17 billion industry in 2017. Whoever thought that Twitch would be popular, where you're watching someone play video games, except that we all love watching someone play a video game. It just is an obvious idea. I feel like this is the same thing. As far as like, getting the awareness out there, I mean, you could just sort of like go shout it from the rooftops and sort of just see what happens. But I think it's important to protect the fledgling genre so that, it stays true to what it is, as opposed to letting it just be like flooded and inundated with everything else. So I think that, again, growth and expansion is awesome. Too much growth and too much expansion all at once might be detrimental. I'm not really sure where to draw that line, but honestly, I feel like you're just gonna let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, it's gonna, whatever happens in the future is kind of gonna just gonna happen. We can to stem the tide. Not that we want to, but I think Taryn was like, hey, well, how can I promote the genre if I get into it? And I would say personally, just do the things you're doing. He has a social media presence. If you want to, use that, or contribute to the various online communities on Facebook or Twitter or on Reddit or whatever. I think those are also great ways. And also just when you're talking to people. I
wanted to write a story. Karen's a super awesome, cool dude. I mean, he's like helped a bunch of other people. He doesn't get paid for that. He doesn't get anything out of it. He's just a really cool cat. So I mean, I hope he does like write with us soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so too. But there are lots of ways you can just all the things you're doing to promote your current stories. Do it there as well. It's perfectly fine. The genre is very much one of those grassroots guerrilla marketing kind of things where it's growing because people are finding it, and then they're like so enthusiastic about finding something that connects all their passions and loves that they're just like screaming from the rooftops, and someone hears them like, hey, what are you talking about? Oh, this thing I love. Come check it out. And it kind of spreads that way. So it's going to kind of grow on its own. I
agree. And I think it's awesome. I mean, people that are coming in now are like, oh my God, I've read everything that's on the list. Like, wow, boo. And I'm like, dude, there's like 100 books on there, man. There were like 4 books. One of them was illegible. I mean, like, what are you complaining about? It's awesome.
No. Yeah. Compared to like what it was even a year ago, you're absolutely correct. But it's like, I'm like, I've read all those books on my list. I understand that most of those haven't come out yet in the last year. So
I agree. Anyway, cool.
Yeah, but I also understand the viewpoint in that you love it so much you just ravenously read through everything all at once, and then you're like, what's next? And you find like, oh, there's not a super ton. There's more coming out every week now, but it's still relatively small compared to like larger genres like fantasy or sci-fi as larger communities.
Which is still cool, I mean, like I said, I would love to get a more diverse crowd. I would love to see someone tie in, like, I mean, Dakota Kraut did a really cool thing where he wrote the dungeon story, but he tied it into Eastern mysticism. Like, that was a cool take, I would love to see someone like, from India that knows their local, folklore and stuff like that and grew up playing Metal Gear Solid, like tie those two things together. I mean, that would be like a really cool thing that would be added. So,
yeah, there are a ton of opportunities. As many types of games as there are in the world, as many types of RPGs and tabletop games, there can be just as many LitRPG stories that are based in different kind of gaming mechanics. I mean, that's one of the beauties about the genre to me, is that there's so many story opportunities. Like they're literally like 2 qualifications in my opinion for LitRPG genre. One, it's set in a game world with evident game mechanics, like you're not hiding your game mechanics of the world. It doesn't have to necessarily be like a video game. It can be tabletop, original, whatever it is. But you do have to share game mechanics. And 2, your characters have to progress according to the game mechanics. It can't just be a story of them being level 1 the entire story and not actually progressing. Part of the draw of video games and tabletops and RPGs is that you have evident demonstration of power growth,
I agree.
levels, skill ranks, whatever it is. That's part of the draw, and so you have to show it. Even if you're, in your story, if you're jumping from level 1 to 100 and you don't show the growth, that's also not lit RPG, because you're just telling some weird video game story.
Yeah.
So those two things are the only things, and everything else is just completely open to interpretation. Any game mechanics, any kind of story, romance, adventure, novel, sci-fi, whatever, all that story stuff, totally open to you guys. And what's going to work or not, I don't know, but those are the two qualifications, and that just leaves so many great opportunities for story.
I mean, I get so excited like when I hear about like, a new release that's coming. I mean, I can get excited like if I'm writing, I have a really cool idea, and I'm like, oh god, I want to write this other thing now.
Yeah, the silly book. Yeah,
because it's awesome. I mean, video games are awesome. Books are awesome.
Mesh them. Yeah, I hear you, man.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna wrap this up real quick for you. Is there anything else that you want to add that I haven't included already?
No, man. I mean, just thank you so much to anyone that has stayed for the 2 hours that Ramon and I have been talking. I really hope that you enjoy Raiders, which will be coming out in a couple of days. And peace, love, perfect margarita, all that kind of stuff. Okay, perfect. We're going to have links in our show notes to all the things related to Aleron Kong and the LitRPG genre and the stuff that he's doing, including his newsletter, where you can find his stuff at litrpg.com, Facebook page, all that great stuff. Yeah. So everything in the show notes for you guys. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me and to listen to me and Aleron talk about this thing that we love, LitRPG, guys. If you want to say goodbye to the audience, Aleron, real quick. Good seeing you guys.
Thanks, everybody, for the LitRPG podcast. I am Ramon Mejia, and until we can talk and see and hang out each other with, again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.